Hi, it's Brenda Durchie, back with Beyond Decluttering and Let's Get Organized. Last time I talked to you about work centers. Work centers is the area that you do specific things in your kitchens. And I promised to talk more about the preparation center or the mixing center this time. So that's the area where you do most of your work in your kitchen. You need some kitchen counter space. It's where you prepare food, do your baking, those kinds of things. So the first thing you need to think about is what kind of tools do you need stored in this general area that's your prep center. You'll need mixing bowls and measuring spoons and measuring cups. And I made myself a list because if I try to think off the top of my head, I'll mess up. Anyway, stirring spoons, wire whips, an electric hand mixer, maybe a food processor, rubber scraper, grater, those kinds of things. That's the kind of tools you need when you're preparing food. If you've got room, it's nice to have your baking sheets or your casserole dishes nearby. Those could be a little further away though, because you kind of only grab them once in this process. And you need consumable foods in this area. So some of those kinds of things are like salt and pepper and your spices and your vanilla and your envelopes of gravy or your seasoning mixes like taco seasoning or whatever those little packets are that you might be using. Maybe a bag of croutons or breadcrumbs, vanilla, baking powder, baking soda, chocolate chips, raisins, coconuts, whatever it is that you use when you're preparing food, that's the kind of stuff you store in this area. You don't need to store things that I'm saying should go there. You store the things that you use when you're fixing food the most. And I don't make cookies really often, so my chocolate chips and my raisins can be a little further away. I can have a little further reach for them. What you're trying to do with your work center is have the things that you need, that you use close by whenever you're doing the work. One of the things you want to remember is whatever works together, lives together. And that's just the principle in this whole idea. You want to contain your work so that you don't have to wander back and forth all over the kitchen. Remember how we talked about your drive to work? How you take the quickest route there? Well, you want to do that in your kitchen too. Take the quickest route to get things done. So we're creatures of habit. Think about what you're doing. Think about what you actually do in this area and what things you use. One of the things that I did, I have a corner cabinet in my mixing center with a Lazy Susan on it. And in that area, I had this great big round pot. That was on one of the shelves. And then I had like 10 pint jars because I use those 10 pint jars in this big round pot when I make yogurt. But I only make yogurt about every 2 weeks if I'm making it regularly. And so I decided that stuff was taking up prime real estate. That was space I needed for other things that got used more often. So I took both the big pot and those pint jars that I only use every couple of weeks, and I moved them off into another area that, I can go and get them without much trouble, but I don't need them right here because I don't use them all that often. So take a look at things like that. What do you maybe have in the area where you prepare food that you don't use often? But it's there, taking up valuable space. Does it need to be moved so that you can put something in this area that you use more often? Okay, so that's one of the things to think about as you're looking at the whole general picture. Now, if you wanted to get real involved, you could completely empty your cabinets and figure out, what do I want in this area? But that's going to the extreme. I don't think most people need to do that. But take a look and see if there's things that could be moved to make your space more available. And prime real estate area is just below your waist and up to eye level. It's where you reach the easiest. And so you want the stuff that you use the most often in those areas. Okay, one of the things you ought to take a look at in this is your shelves. Most kitchens today have adjustable shelves. They've got the little pegs in, you can move your shelf height. How many people look at that and think that they ought to move it? That's one of the first things I do when I move into a kitchen is take a look at that space and see how small, how short an area I can use on my bottom shelf. I figure out what needs to go there, what kinds of stuff go across, and I try to put the same general height on the same shelf so that I can lower the shelves as low as is reasonable. And I don't want to make it uncomfortable to get things out, but lower it to what's reasonable. That way, if you do that with your bottom shelf, then the next shelf is down a little lower, and your top shelf can come down lower so you can reach things. That's what I'm after, is trying to get that top shelf as low as is reasonable so that I can reach it. Sometimes it needs to be up high, but take a look at that and see if you can make an adjustment that way. And so in that same idea with that top shelf that is harder to get at, you put things up there and it gets slid to the back. You can't reach them, you don't know what's back there, you can't see it. I like to make that stuff available. There's a couple of ways to do that. Here's one of them. This plastic bin happens to be the right width here that it takes really good advantage of your 12-inch cabinets. So what I do with this is it goes up on a top shelf. I can slide it in, I can pull it out, get what I need, put it back up in the cupboard. Yes, that's 2 grabs, but it makes that stuff way easier to get than if all these things were out loose on the cabinet or on the shelf in the cabinet. And you can buy plastic bins like that, but sometimes I'm pretty tight and I don't always buy plastic bins. Sometimes when I'm at the store, I find cardboard boxes that work just fine. This is one of them that fits perfect. The width right here is just right for one of my small doors, and the depth here is perfect. I'm not wasting any space at all. I put what I need there, and I can pull it out, set it on the counter, get what I want, put it back. It works great. Here's another box I just happened to find that if you've got wider cabinet doors, again, it's the perfect length to stick in on a shelf. And what I call that is turning a shelf into a drawer, but it's a movable drawer. So you can bring it down and use it. It makes those top shelves so much handier. Let's see, talked about similar height, start at the bottom, make removable drawers. One of the other things that you can do, if you've got a shelf where there's a particularly large space and you want more room, then this has the hook so that it just slides onto your shelf. So that way you've got some storage underneath as well as having this. It kind of divides the shelf up if you want to. One of the other things that I like to do is, another idea is contain and conquer. So when you're putting things in your drawers, find ways to divide them up. So things, I guess I better make sure this is high enough you can see it. But put dividers in your drawers, ways to contain stuff in the space you're trying to use. Maybe you could put your measuring cups in a bin, put your measuring spoons in a little container. But it's nice if these aren't all floating around loose in a drawer. Contain and conquer. It makes it easier to find it, makes it easier to put it away. And some people prefer doing that. To be honest, I kind of like to organize to the extreme. And this is my favorite for measuring cups and spoons. So I put hooks on the door in my mixing center, and I prefer having it right beside my spices and like baking powder and baking soda, things like that you're using, so that my cupboard door is open. I've got access to my measuring cups and my measuring spoons, and all the spices and the things I might be using with them are right there handy. So that's my and you need to pay attention when you're doing this. In this particular situation, I had my measuring spoons on the bottom because right here inside the cupboard was my Lazy Susan that had all my spices on, and that filled up the space. So there wasn't room to have measuring cups where my Lazy Susan was at. And so I made sure that my cups hung so that they didn't hit the shelf and they didn't hit whatever was stored on the shelf. So you have to make some adjustments there to make sure that works. But this is wonderful. And oh, please consider getting all the measuring cups. I don't know why they sell measuring cups without a 2/3 and a 3/4 cup. That's just, you need that in a set of measuring cups. So if you can, find that. It makes your mixing center so much handier so that you don't have to measure 1/3 of a cup twice when you want 2/3 of a cup. Anyway, that's my thing for measuring cups and measuring spoons. All right, one of the other things that I'm only going to talk about instead of show you, my kitchen is too small. I don't have an open kitchen. There's not room for the camera and me and lights so that you can see what's going on. But in my mixing center, I love to have my spices so that you can find them. Oh, I forgot to bring it upstairs. My mother-in-law had a little setup, and you can buy these, where the spices sit at different heights. But the trouble with those things is that you can't read what the spice is. You can see them and grab them individually. It's not like they're all stacked behind each other, but you still don't see what they are. The label is too low, even though they're raised up some. And that doesn't work for me. There's ways to put spices in a drawer. My daughter has inserts that you put in the drawer that actually are just these, they're just kind of rounded. They're not deep like those things I showed you earlier, but you can put spices in the drawer that way and you can read everything. That's a great way to do it if you've got narrow drawers that you can put those in. The thing I've often done is use Lazy Susans, and I go to extreme here. Takes a little minute for me to get it organized, but it saves so much time in the long run. My spices are actually alphabetized. That way I can spin my Lazy Susan and I know right where it is. I can find it. I know where to put it back. It's always in the same place. Before I did that, it was just everywhere because I do have a lot of spices. It took me a long time to find things, and I just really like it more convenient. That's the whole idea behind the things I'm teaching you about, is make your space more functional. Save time. Yes, it takes time to organize it, but that's once. Just one time. You take the time, and I happen to have a whole lot of spices because I'd been living somewhere else for a while. I came home, and home was with my mother-in-law, so I had her spices. I had the spices that I'd already had in my house that were down in my little kitchenette, and I had the spices that I had while I was off living somewhere else to help my daughter. And so I just took all the spices out, alphabetized them all on the counter, saw where I had the duplicates, got rid of the excess, got rid of the outdated stuff, and then I put my spices on Lazy Susans and alphabetized them, and I moved them from where my mother-in-law had them over to where they were in my mixing center. And it made life so much easier once I had that done. So I guess it's time to recap. The idea behind a work center is that you have the things you use, the tools and the consumable foods that you're using for a certain job in that area. And you have the tools you need. Whatever works together, lives together. So if you're using tools for this job, then those tools should be in this area. The food, the consumable things that you use to do that job should be close in this area. You're just, whatever it is, you have to figure out what you do in your kitchen, because I do different things than you do. You may not make yogurt, you may not make bread, but you do other things. Whatever it is you do in your kitchen, look at those particular jobs and see where you typically do them in your kitchen and how far and how often you wander to different places to get what you need to do that job. That's the idea here. Look at that and get your things together. Well, I wanted to comment about the things that don't belong in your work center, because you do have consumable food in this area. but it isn't necessarily an area where you keep consumable food like snacks or prepared cereals. Things like that go in another area. They don't need to take up space in your work center, in your preparation center. So anyway, I hope you have fun taking a look at your particular preparation area and see what you can do to make it more functional. I'd love to hear comments, and truly, if you've got questions or can show me a picture of an area you have a challenge with, I will honestly take the time to look at it. I'm just getting started with this. My thing has always been to go into people's homes and help them. Making videos about this is new, but I'm good at coming into your home and helping you make an area more functional. And so right now I still have time. So if you put questions or show me pictures of areas that are problem areas, you might be surprised at what I can do to give you some ideas to make it more functional. Have fun. Talk to you next time. Goodbye.